Here was a country that had everything, absolutely everything. And now, 20 years later, is what? The world's biggest leper colony. Why? Godlessness. It wasn't the war they started. It wasn't the plague they created. It was judgment. I think it's high time we let the colonies know what we really think of them. I think it's payback time for a little tea party they threw for us a few hundred years ago. I say we go down to those docks tonight and dump that crap where everything from the ulcered sphincter of our Serica belongs. Who's with me? Who's bloody with me? No one escapes their past. No one escapes judgment. We did what we had to do. Islington, Enfield, I was there, I saw it all. Immigrants, Muslims, homosexuals, terrorists, disease-ridden degenerates. They had to go. Strength through unity. Unity through faith. I'm a God-fearing Englishman and I'm goddamn proud of it.
That's quite enough of that, thank you very much.
Remember that time when we thought that dystopian fiction was just, fiction? Good times, simpler times, times before we started nodding along to V for Vendetta like it was a documentary with particularly theatrical dress codes. Every few years, Alan Moore and David Lloyd's masterpiece surges back into cultural relevance with such perfect timing, it almost feels orchestrated, like V himself is scheduling these periodic reminders from behind his porcelain smile. 2025 appears to be one of those moments, and for disturbing reasons that speak to our current reality. Full disclosure, I initially fell for V for Vendetta because cool vigilante goes kaboom while wearing theatrical mask. It seemed like an excellent premise for rebellious late night viewing. Plus, the mask also made for a really cool Halloween costume that somehow both impressed English majors and confused the hell out of the adults in my life. No harmony, I'm not from the Phantom of the Opera, and no, I'm not from a horror movie either. Yes, you know what? I am a goth mime. Oh, hello there. YouTube gamed that one skit from the whitest kids you know that we can't say out loud.
Did you know that it's illegal to say I want to kill the President of the United States of America? It's illegal. It's a federal offense. It's one of the only sentences that you're not allowed to say.
Back at it again with another banger. And a left-handed book. So for today's video, I wanted to take a look at the graphic novel and the movie V for Vendetta and really just kind of take a look at the parallels and see how this graphic novel is starting to very increasingly parallel today's world. So if that sounds fun for you for some reason, go ahead and keep watching. I am trying to reach 3,500 subscribers by my 35th birthday, which is this August. And also if I reach 3.5 million subscribers by my 35th birthday, I will run for president of the United States of America. So, we got a lot to do, people. Oh, also before we get started, before we hit the intro, I'm sorry about how much I had to butcher this footage in order to get it to pass through. But I tried to at least make it more artistic looking and at least tried to include it as a visual motif. So hopefully that makes up for it. Let me know what you think. I tried a little bit, so I should be rewarded with you guys subscribing and sharing my video. And thank you. Let's get on with it. And don't forget, as V himself would say,
there are no coincidences, Delia. Only the illusion of coincidence.
Step on it, Daddy!
So the story opens with V's rescue of Evie from the Fingerman on Guy Fawkes night, immediately establishing its obsession with historical memory. V doesn't just wear Fawkes' face, he embodies the spirit of resistance that Fawkes represents in popular imagination. Though let's be honest, most of us first encountered Guy Fawkes in the "wait, who is this dude again" section of world history class, right before we completely forgot about him until this comic came along. For those of you who slept through that day of class, I see you, so here's a quick recap. Guy Fawkes was basically the world's least successful bomber who tried to blow up the Parliament building in 1605, and he also got caught because someone in his crew decided to snitch on him. Yet somehow this failed terrorist became a symbol of resistance, failed rebellions make strange mascots, but here we are. In 2025, this emphasis on historical memory feels more urgent than ever. As Freedom House reports, global freedom has declined for the 19th consecutive year, with 60 countries experiencing deterioration in their political rights and civil liberties, while only 34 secured improvements. This slow, incremental erosion relies partly on collective forgetting, on our failure to recognize historical patterns of how freedoms are lost. Our current moment mirrors V's opening sequence in unsettling ways. The Economist intelligence unit notes that once a government shifts towards authoritarianism, it rarely reverses course, with authoritarian regimes increasing from 52 to 60 countries over the past decade. Like Evie at the beginning of the story, we find ourselves in a moment where understanding our historical context isn't just academic, it's survival. Though, unlike Evie, most of us don't have a Shakespeare-quoting vigilante ready to swoop in when we break curfew, and that's honestly a real design flaw in our current timeline if you ask me. But the real question isn't about how we recognize patterns of control, it's about what we preserve when those patterns emerge. But to discuss that topic further, we need to enter the Shadow Gallery. So, after rescuing Evie, V brings her to his underground sanctuary, the Shadow Gallery, a space filled with banned art, literature, and music that the regime deemed too dangerous. The film gives us a lush museum-like space with Renaissance art and classic film posters, while the comic presents something more claustrophobic and cave-like, literally underground resistance. This isn't just V's man cave, though it is definitely that too. The guy managed to create the world's most elaborate bachelor pad during a fascist apocalypse, which is honestly kinda inspiring. It's a deliberate preservation of culture that the government wanted erased. One line from the film that regularly sneaks into my parenting vocabulary comes when V explains to Evie, artists use lies to tell the truth while politicians use them to cover the truth up. Now, I've had to more or less explain this concept to my kids when talking about why some stories really hit harder than others despite the fact that they are not real, And I haven't even shown them Watership Down yet. Would that be like the most age-appropriate parenting mood? Who's to say? But I mean, I'm trying to raise tiny cultural critics here, and that requires advanced material sometimes. V is essentially that friend who won't stop talking about their vinyl collection except with more revolutionary intent. Oh, you've never heard this extremely obscure jazz record? Let me change your life while also overthrowing the government. It's like if your favorite plumber of Italian descent had a manifesto instead of just opinions about different types of bidets. In our 2025 landscape of disappearing digital archives, algorithmic content suppression, and authoritarian bans on what they would call corrupt foreign influence, the Shadow Gallery concept hits differently. When books are being banned at record rates and museums must navigate increasingly complex political terrain, V's curatorial project feels less like hoarding and more like sacred work. That with V were around today, he'd be less about streaming subscriptions and more about massive server racks humming in the corner of the Shadow Gallery, filled with petabytes of meticulously organized cultural artifacts. Every episode of One Piece must be preserved, Evie. Yes, all 1,300 of them. You never know when you'll have time to watch them, but more importantly, you'll never know when they'll try to erase them. Also, I've archived the entirety of Wikipedia, just in case. The Shadow Gallery reminds us that preserving precious pieces of the past isn't passive, it's a profound political act. V doesn't just save anti-fascist propaganda, he saves romantic poetry, classic films, and vintage movie posters. His collection asserts that freedom isn't just about politics, it's about the full range of human expression itself. It's also the ultimate rebuttal to anyone who ever asked an English major, "What are you gonna do with that degree?" Apparently, they're gonna save civilization, Karen, so sit down. And speaking of having to break a few eggs to make a justice omelet, we have some rather extreme ideas about accountability that will feel disturbingly relevant in 2025. So as a really quick detour, I want to talk about something that's exclusive to the film. The film introduces a character with no comic equivalent, Gordon Dietrich, who is played by the always brilliant Stephen Fry, a closeted television host, well, not Stephen Fry, Gordon. Gordon is a closeted television host who shelters Evie after an extended encounter with V. Gordon represents yet another form of resistance, the satirist who tests the boundaries of permissible speech through comedy. In one of the film's most chilling sequences, Gordon airs a comedy sketch mocking High Chancellor Sutler. But what follows serves as the film's stark reminder that in authoritarian systems, even laughter is lethal. The black bags come in the night, his crime of homosexuality is exposed, and by morning, he's gone, disappeared like thousands before him. The punchline proves fatal, and the comedian's courage costly. This sequence delivers a message that resonates pretty hard today, as comedians are facing increasing pressure to self-censor politically charged content across global markets. When satire stutters and silence spreads, when comics carefully calibrate their criticism to avoid cancellation, both cultural and literal, we edge closer to Norsefire's narrative control. Gordon's fate reminds us that the canary in the coal mine of creeping authoritarianism is often the silencing of those who dare to laugh at power. As the story progresses, V systematically eliminates those who ran Larkhill, the concentration camp where he was tortured and transformed. In one of the film's most striking visual sequences, we see Delia Surridge, the doctor who experimented on V, accepting her fate as he injects her with poison.
Is it meaningless to apologize?
Never, V responds in a rare moment of mercy amid his revenge tour. The film's most breathtaking sequence, the Old Bailey explosion, set to Tchaikovsky. This is pure Wachowski Sakuga, giving V's theatrical tendencies a bombastic visual expression that Moore's original never quite needed. Yet both versions understand that V's methods aren't just about vengeance, they're about performance. His attacks are carefully choreographed propaganda. Terrorism is theater, where the symbolism matters as much as the destruction itself. A quote that echoes through these sequences provides the most direct justification for V's methods. Violence can be used for good. It's the kind of line that made teenage me feel edgy and enlightened, and adult me slightly nervous when my 7-year-old repeats it with the conviction that that type of idea requires. Nothing says I'm nailing this parenting thing like your second grader quoting revolutionary rhetoric during their classroom conflict resolution session. This man turned vengeance into performance art, and you have to respect the commitment to the bit. But today, to me, this all raises uncomfortable questions about justice and accountability in failing systems. When government agencies use facial recognition to identify protesters in countries like India, Russia, China, the United States, the United Kingdom. Hey, hi there. Just wanted to pop in real quick and say thank you for spending your time with me. Thank you for watching this video. If you made it this far and you didn't click off because you were wondering what I had to say at this point, then guess what? You're the sponsor for this video. Yes, you. And you know what you are doing as paying me as being the sponsor to talk about how awesome you are? You're clicking the subscribe button. And then you're hitting the like button, and then you're sharing this with a friend. So thank you, Mr. Sponsor, or Mrs. Sponsor, or Mix Sponsor, or LLC. So thank you, regardless. And yeah, on with the video. Also, if I make it to 3.5 million subscribers on my 35th birthday, I'll run for president of the United States in 2028. Australia, France, Iran, Brazil, Hong Kong, and Turkey, directly targeting individuals who participate in demonstrations. What becomes of accountability itself? The technology fundamentally shifts the safety and numbers dynamic that traditionally protected protesters, as a lone face in the crowd is no longer anonymous. These types of practices have become normalized across different political systems and economic development levels, making these concerns about justice outside of conventional systems increasingly relevant to audiences everywhere. In the United States, the Department of Homeland Security acknowledged using these powerful AI surveillance technologies while claiming to protect privacy and individual rights, a framing that would make Norsefire's propaganda wing proud. As these tools grow more sophisticated, the questions V raises about justice outside conventional systems become less rhetorical and more practical, though most of us express our discontent by leaving a 1-star review rather than masterminding elaborate plots involving Beethoven's Fifth and fireworks displays. The scenes where V targets Louis Prothero, the regime's propaganda voice, and Bishop Lillman, who sexually exploited Larkhill inmates. Who controls the narrative? I mean, who enforces morality, and who watches the watchers? And who watches the watchmen? These aren't just philosophical questions anymore. They're literally being debated in Congress, though with significantly fewer capes and theatrical flourishes. Really quick, I will say there is something surreal about watching a story born from Margaret Thatcher's Britain now feel prophetic about everything happening in 2025. Alan Moore's original work was laser focused on British politics, a pointed anarchist response to the Thatcherism that the Wachowskis transformed into something that is more universally digestible. Its cultural diffusion is both liberation and dilution. It's like watching that video of Chapel Roan playing in the middle of a park in, I think, New York for like 10, 15 people, and then it switches to her playing headline arenas and music festivals and stuff like that. Something's gained and something's lost, but the core message reaches millions more. And there are also a few scenes in the comics that have no film equivalent. Finch's LSD trip through Larkhill, for instance, where he chemically induces a vision of V's experiences. There's also V's Rose Garden, a beautiful space where he cultivates flowers beside the concentration camp graveyard. Literal beauty growing from death, and it's a metaphor that's way too subtle for a film adaptation, but it is crucial to understanding the comic's nuanced take on violence and rebirth. But we'll get more deeper into those comic exclusives later. This transformation, though, does explain how V transcended from character to avatar. When protesters from Hong Kong to Santiago to DC don that mask, they're not connecting to British anarchist philosophy. They're embracing a simplified, exportable symbol of resistance that works across cultural boundaries. As I watch my kids discovering their own political consciousness just through the world around them, I'm watching this symbolic evolution continue in real time. The endless remix of meaning that keeps stories alive across generations, but there is also a dark irony to this global adoption that would make V himself reach for his daggers, though we'll need to follow the money before that becomes all clear. At the story's midpoint, we learn how Norsefire's regime rose to power by releasing a bioweapon called the St. Mary's virus, and then heroically solving it with a cure that they had already possessed. This manufactured emergency created the fear necessary to justify their authoritarian takeover, which, as evil plans go, is both incredibly elaborate and yet somehow more practical than most James Bond villain schemes. The film itself, though, makes this plot point explicit, while the comic leaves more to implication. In both versions, the regime's rise depends on a perfect cocktail of fear and hate. Economic collapse, environmental catastrophe, disease, war sound familiar? They create a vacuum of certainty that only strong man leadership can fill. Like most dystopian fiction, it's not the individual disasters that create totalitarianism, it's a response to them, the willingness to surrender freedom for security. Like, think about this, the St. Mary's virus plot hits way differently pre-2020, when most of us thought that pandemics were strictly historical events or zombie movie premises. Now it all lands with the subtlety of that one friend who keeps sending you conspiracy theory videos at 3 a.m. Have you considered that maybe the government? Yes, Brad, we've all considered it. We were all there. We all panicked about the toilet paper. We remember. Now, while government-created bioweapons aren't just fiction, the US maintained an extensive biological weapons program at Fort Detrick until 1969. The UK developed anthrax weapons at Porton Down, and the Soviet Union's biopreparat employed thousands before these programs were officially discontinued. There remain legitimate concerns about gain-of-function research and potential pandemic pathogens. When we watch Sutler's regime discuss how their manufactured crisis consolidated their power, it now plays less like dystopian fiction and more like a warning about how fearful fabrications foster fascist frameworks. It's the political version of when your toddler creates a crisis by spilling juice so they can heroically solve it by using all the paper towels in the house. Except with, fascism. But while the fear is the weapon of control, V understood that something else remained unconquerable even in the darkest cells of Larkhill, though we will need Valerie's letter to truly understand what that is. One of the most powerful scenes in both versions is Valerie's letter, detailing her persecution as a lesbian under the regime. The film gives us Valerie as an actress whose final film was banned, while the comic presents her as an ordinary woman whose life was destroyed simply for loving another woman. It's the moment where even the most stoic viewers find themselves suddenly dealing with an unexpected dust particle in their eye. While I always struggle to find a way to explain why this scene always just messes me up, I think it really comes down to the power of Valerie's words.
I shall die here. Every inch of me shall perish. Every inch. But one. An inch. It is small and it is fragile, and it is the only thing in the world worth having. We must never lose it or give it away. We must never let them take it from us.
Like, trying to explain that concept to my kids, that there is that true core part of us that can never ever be broken if we don't let the world do so. It led to one of those conversations where you realize that, like, even at a very young age, kids understand way more and like a lot more nuance about the world than you would really think. So for my 7-year-old, they said, oh, it's like when the boys at school make fun of me for using the same words that our teachers do. And yeah, it's exactly like that, kiddo. You know, who cares if you were sounding like a little adult? I mean, I think it's adorable personally. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just like that with much lower stakes and not as good cinematography. You know what I mean? Sorry, kiddo. Oh, hi, Iris. You just hanging out? V torturing Evie for her own good raises uncomfortable questions about ends justifying means, questions the comic doesn't need to address in quite the same way. But Valerie's story cuts to the heart of what makes V for Vendetta resonate across decades. Its insistence that the true resistance begins not with bombs or masks, but with the refusal to capitulate your humanity. It's the integrity of one's mind that they cannot steal, she writes, a line that it feels increasingly vital in a world where micro-targeted propaganda campaigns attempt to shape public opinion and where personal data is harvested for political purposes. The battle for mental sovereignty, for the right to determine your own thoughts and values, it lies at the core of both versions. It's why V subjects Evie to simulated imprisonment. He's not just testing her courage, he's showing her that freedom begins in the mind. Though let's acknowledge that V's methods would likely earn him precisely 0 stars on Rate My Teacher. Help me discover inner strength by simulating my torture and execution. Great results, but questionable technique. Would not recommend. Like today, as we navigate information environments explicitly designed to manipulate our emotions and behavior, Valerie's defiant integrity feels like a roadmap for digital self-defense. With state-sponsored internet propaganda documented in countries across the globe, from China's 50 Cent Party to Russia's Internet Research Agency, maintaining one's mental autonomy has become a daily challenge rather than a dramatic moment of resistance. Less defiantly writing a letter in a concentration camp and more consciously remembering that the algorithm showing you 6 consecutive videos about how toast is secretly evil might have an agenda. So something that I realized was the beautiful absurdity of ordering your Revolution starter kit with same-day delivery isn't really lost on me when I try to explain that Guy Fawkes mask for Halloween is actually important and not just spooky. The mask that once represented anarchist resistance now represents a complex web of intellectual property rights. Time Warner, now Warner Brothers Discovery, owns the rights to the image, meaning that every act of resistance involving an official mask generates revenue for one of the largest media conglomerates on the planet. When Anonymous adopted the mask for their protests against Scientology in like 2007-2008, they inadvertently created one of the most successful movie merchandise campaigns in history. The symbol of fighting the system became the system itself, a perfect encapsulation of how capitalism absorbs and commodifies even the resistance against it. These mass-manufactured masks of momentary militancy reveal the paradoxical power of modern protest, simultaneously undermining authority while reinforcing the very economic structures that enable it. This isn't just abstract theory when you're navigating a world where your child's first political awakening might come through mass-produced merchandise. It's the practical reality of trying to nurture authentic values in a world where everything, even resistance itself, has been transformed into a consumer good. The challenge becomes teaching kids to see beyond symbols to the substance beneath, a skill that feels increasingly essential as the line between authenticity and performance just grows ever thinner. The comic version of V would find this commodification of resistance particularly ironic, and likely worthy of explosive response. Moore's anarchist themes were explicitly anti-capitalist, and the comics V would see the mass market version of his mask as yet another form of system control. The film version of V, with his more liberally oriented philosophy, might be more pragmatic, appreciating that the symbol spreads even as its meaning becomes more diluted. Both versions understand the power of symbols, but they differ dramatically in how they see transformation happening. The comic through individual succession, the film through collective action. In one of the film's most memorable scenes, V articulates the philosophy behind this climactic revolution.
The building is a symbol, as is the act of destroying it. Symbols are given power by people. Alone, a symbol is meaningless, but with enough people, blowing up a building can change the world.
Like, to me, this quote comes to mind as a way to explain to my kids why they are seeing more people do more protests across the entire country. Watching them process the concept that collective action has power beyond individual action is like watching a tiny revolutionary being born in real time. To focus back on the comic version again real quick, the comic contains a sequence that never made it to film, and that is V's rose garden. Throughout the comic, V cultivates roses with the same attention he gives to revolution. It's a powerful metaphor for rebirth through destruction that the film doesn't really quite capture. When Evie takes up V's mantle in the comic, she inherits both his destructive tools and this garden, suggesting that true resistance requires both the courage to tear down and the patience to nurture what comes after. This imagery of collective action takes on new dimensions today, when we've witnessed how digital tools can both amplify and suppress mass movements. In Bangladesh, student protests against corruption and democratic erosion grew into a national movement that ultimately led to its prime minister to flee the country. In Georgia, nationwide protests erupted when the ruling party abandoned EU accession, which many saw as sealing the government's turn toward authoritarianism. The domino sequence itself, where V arranges thousands of dominoes in the shape of his logo, only to topple them at precisely the right moment, serves as a perfect metaphor for how change happens. Meticulous preparation leading to a cascade of events that once started cannot be stopped. It's also a reminder that even revolutionary masterminds need hobbies. Some people do puzzles, others knit. V spends 17 hours perfectly arranging thousands of dominoes in his underground lair. We all cope with fascism in different ways. I also think that the moral complexity of V for Vendetta becomes unavoidable when you're watching it through the lens of what kind of world you're preparing your kids to navigate. V's methods make for compelling cinema, but they represent a fundamentally theatrical approach to political change that raises uncomfortable questions about means and ends. In real life, resistance is messier, more sustained, and usually less photogenic than V's domino sequence. It involves community organizing, mutual aid networks, and the unglamorous work of building alternative systems, none of which really translates well to dramatic slow-motion explosions set to Tchaikovsky. What sticks with me as a parent isn't really V's grand gestures, but Valerie's letter. The quiet, persistent refusal to surrender one's humanity, even under the most dehumanizing conditions. And in my opinion, that is the kind of resistance that is worth modeling. This matters because symbolic resistance without substantive action functions as a safety valve that helps maintain the status quo. When we feel like we've done something by wearing a mask or sharing a hashtag or attending a single protest, we might be less motivated to engage in the ongoing, unsexy work of actual systemic change. As civil disobedience scholars note, protest loses political potency when it's purely performative. True resistance requires skin in the game, real disruption that forces systems to respond, not just acknowledgement of dissent that can be safely ignored. The challenge becomes teaching discernment discernment, helping the next generation distinguish between aesthetic rebellion and meaningful action in a world where pageantry perpetually pretends to possess political power. I really do think that this current moment of nationalist certainty and philosophical resistance really does also perfectly encapsulate our current moment in time. Though, I mean, if we are going to be honest, saying ideas are bulletproof, it sounds way cooler on a t-shirt than England prevails. And I mean, even then, that phrase sounds like it would be used as like a bootleg World Cup. It'd be, you know, the world kettle or something like that. It would be on a bootleg World Cup shirt. The world kettle. In the comic's final pages, Evie rescues a random stranger just as V once rescued her, continuing the cycle of transformation. The film gives us a more definitive ending, Parliament exploding as thousands watch, suggesting that the revolution is complete. This difference speaks to their divergent philosophies. Moore sees resistance as ongoing personal transformation, one step at a time, one person at a time, while the Wachowskis present a more traditional revolutionary narrative with a clear climactic moment of victory. Both send us away thinking about legacies, what we pass on and what we change and what ends up remaining when we're gone. While I have used this quote with my kids, also at the same time telling my kids that ideas are bulletproof when they attend elementary school does seem a little bit gauche, but there is still something strangely powerful about telling them that your ideas can't be hurt by their words. Then I just immediately wonder if teaching my children revolutionary rhetoric at such a young age, if I am leading them to being just basically a tiny version of Guy Fawkes in middle school and elementary school. But I mean, like, parenting is hard. Parenting is really hard, especially when you were raised on anime and 90s cartoons and graphic novels and all that. You just can't really help but be a little bit radicalized. V's final ideas are bulletproof speech remains as one of my favorite cinematic monologues, though it's worth noting that it's significantly easier to deliver profound philosophical statements when you're wearing a mask. The rest of us have to worry about having something stuck in our teeth or making accidental weird faces while discussing the nature of freedom. Being a revolutionary, after all, is 30% ideology and 70% presentation. So as we navigate a complex landscape of rising authoritarianism, sophisticated surveillance, and informational warfare, the core message of V for Vendetta feels more vital than ever. Systems of oppression rely on fear, and fear can be overcome. The film's most quoted line, "People should not be afraid of their governments should be afraid of their people," takes on new urgency in a world where Freedom House documents democratic backsliding for nearly 2 decades. So, finally, where does this leave us? Trying to make sense of a world that increasingly resembles the dystopian fiction we once consumed for entertainment, while simultaneously trying to raise humans who might actually improve it. I find myself returning to V for Vendetta not just as cultural analysis, but as an unexpected framework for processing my own parenting journey. Not because I'm planning to teach mask making and demolition, it's illegal to own a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook, but I didn't say those words, but because it offers metaphors for the world my kids are inheriting and how they might navigate it. The Shadow Gallery reminds me that preservation matters, and that creating spaces where knowledge, art, and imagination can flourish becomes an act of resistance when those things are under threat. In a world of book bans and algorithmic censorship, cultivating curiosity and critical thinking in the next generation feels increasingly radical. Valerie's letter offers a touchstone for resilience, the recognition that there exists in each of us something that cannot be taken away unless we willingly surrender it. Helping children identify and preserve their core humanity amid external pressures becomes not just good parenting, but perhaps the most fundamental form of resistance. And perhaps most powerful is the comic's Rose Garden, V's reminder that destruction is only meaningful if it creates space for new beauty to grow. True change requires both, the courage to dismantle what harms and the patience to cultivate what heals. But perhaps most importantly, V for Vendetta challenges me me to consider what meaningful resistance looks like in daily life. The small, consistent choices that shape who we become and what world we create. Grand gestures make for compelling stories, but it's the accumulated weight of countless small actions that ultimately bends the arc of history. What makes this story worth revisiting isn't its increasingly accurate predictions about surveillance and authoritarianism, it's the fundamental questions it forces us to confront about courage, integrity, and how freedom is lost and reclaimed. These aren't just academic exercises when you're helping shape how the next generation understands power and resistance. Remember, the future isn't written yet, and how we internalize and live these questions may matter more than whatever mask we choose to wear. For in the face of fear-mongering figureheads and feeble facades of freedom, it falls to us, the faithful, to finally find that flame of fierce, focused, fundamental resistance that V himself would venerate. Alright, so that is my video about V for Vendetta. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Let me know if there's anything that you want me to talk about. Have you seen V for Vendetta the movie, or have you read V for Vendetta the graphic novel? Have you experienced both? Which one did you think was better? Which one did you think was worse? Let me know. What is your favorite adaptation? What is your favorite post-apocalyptic dystopian novel adaptation? All sorts of things for the algorithm. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Once again, thank you guys for being the sponsor for this video. My dog is scratching herself in her crate right now, so if you hear that, that's what that is. And for the next video, I don't know. I might talk about Lorcana. I really want to talk about Lorcana. So, and let's talk about Lorcana next video. So anyways, thank you again. Watch a couple of more of my videos. Like and subscribe. Do all the YouTube-y things. 3.5 million subs for president. Yeah, if that really happens, I'm screwed. Like, I'm actually gonna have to do that, but that would make some killer content, so let's see. Okay, bye.